Hello and welcome back to the Books, a podcast which has had more rebirths, rebrands and reissues than Lady Gaga. I am joined once again by my fabulous co-host, Isabelle Flynn. Isabelle, howdy, how are we? Sorry, did I throw you off?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the listener, we did not discuss that. That was not a planned intro. Kieran just decided to bring an absolute A-game intro, and I had absolutely no idea. But yes, you are correct. We have had more like reunion tours than Cher at this point. Yes. So, yeah. But we're back.
But we are back. We're back for a brand new year. After 2 years of just muddling through, we are back and we are galvanised and ready to take you all onto a fantastic new literary journey into our favourite books, general conversations, and whatever we're really sort of thinking about. Today, we are going to outline kind of our objectives, shall we say, Isabelle, about kind of what we want to do for the year in terms of our reading, our approaches, anything we're going to do differently, anything we want to try. And then we're also going to recommend 3 top picks of 2022, so books that we want to read this year. And this can be books that have yet to come out, or books that we have owned for many a year and have sat crying on our shelves, desperately waiting to be read. So there's no rules, just kind of books that we want to start off with 2022, even though we're nearly at the end of January. But who cares? Rules are there to be broken.
Fashionably late, it's fine. Fashionably late. But yes.
It's all right. We're very good at making French exits here. So I'm just going to sort of kickstart the conversation, if that's okay with you, Isabelle.
Yeah, go for it. I haven't had to say anything so far. You're absolutely smashing it.
Oh, there we go. I promise to shut up in a few seconds. So, it's brand new year, and I think when we start a new year, there's an expectation of we need to be reading straight away. Like, I know, for example, I've seen a few people on social media, Instagram, etc., who are already on like their 4th or 5th book of the year. And what that does to me is puts this kind of pressure on me, like, you're not reading, and why the hell are you not reading? So it's almost like a scrambling. And I just wanted to sort of start this conversation with, do you feel that same kind of pressure? And like, is this maybe just like a yearly thing with attitudes towards reading? I'm curious.
I mean, I think we've both been guilty in the past of doing what I think a lot of people do, which is get to a fresh year and go, right, this is the year I read like 120 books. This is the year I crack through my entire TBR. Yep. This is the year I read all of those books that I've been sort of telling myself I'll definitely read someday, but have been scrolling through TikTok instead.
Yep.
And I think that I've definitely been guilty of this in the past, but over the last couple of years, I've had a bit of a kind of shift with how I think of my reading. I think of it less as a sort of spectator sport now. I like talking about books online. I like kind of being part of the community, but I try and be less sort of performative about books, I think I would say.
Yeah.
Just because I think ultimately we all sort of feed into this kind of collective FOMO about books. Mm-hmm. And you're right, we do pile a sort of weird amount of pressure on ourselves and each other to be kind of visibly reading all the time, and visibly reading like that hot proof that you've managed to get your hands on that loads of people don't have. And obviously that's part of book marketing. Like, we both get that. That's a completely like normal thing that's happened.
It's the game.
Yeah. But it wasn't great for the way that I was looking at my own reading, and it wasn't, weirdly, I think it would give me sort of analysis paralysis. I would want to read all of these books and then I'd read nothing. And so taking that pressure away from myself and being like, well, I'll just kind of read whatever I want when I want, has become a much healthier and more comfortable way to read. And actually, that was kind of the way I was reading in the latter half of last year. Mm-hmm. Just not I kind of fell off of Bookstagram for ages and ages and ages, purely because I felt, let's see what happens when I'm reading in private.
And you're not kind of sharing it as a like a public kind of display of, look what I'm reading, I finished this, on to the next thing. It's less performative.
Yeah, exactly. When you kind of decouple the idea that reading, reading is, and has been for like hundreds of years, a sort of definitively private thing. It's been quite a long time. When books first sort of came around, you didn't read silently in your head. Everybody always read out loud. And over time it became this very like private, personal thing. And I think it's weird that we've now got this relationship with books where they are intensely personal and they are these private reading experiences, and then we feel compelled to sort of then kind of expose them back out again. I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking aloud, but yeah, I definitely felt that in the latter half of last year I read some amazing books and I felt really, really good about reading them and keeping them to myself, like they were my little secret. And eventually I spoke about them, but yeah, I've sort of come back to kind of bookish social media and like the bookish online community with a kind of a fresh idea of how I want to treat my reading, especially with regards to how I then use my reading as a sort of hook into other people's lives and attention and into this kind of online community. So yeah, I don't know if you feel similar or if you've got kind of concrete plans to change how you interact with it.
It's interesting what you've said there about reading and keeping it private, because it is such an intensely private thing when you think about it. Like, just my routine is before I go to bed I do my ablutions, which take about an hour, and then I go to bed, but I sit and read in bed for an hour, maybe longer depending on what I'm reading, but I don't tell everyone that I'm doing that. And it's a weirdly relaxing, humbling thing. It just feels really, really nice. But then also sometimes when you finish the book, that pressure and that kind of chip on your shoulder of you've not written your review yet, you've not posted it to your Instagram followers, you've not said anything about it on Twitter. And I think especially, like you said, when you've been given the latest hot proof of the year and you've not said anything about it, there's a guilt trip there almost. That I think is an internal thing, because you're not being hounded excuse me, by publicists left, right and centre to talk about the book online, and if you don't, that proof is revoked.
Yeah, they come to your house and they take it off you.
Yeah, like loan sharks or something, but just purely for books.
Book bailiffs.
But it's interesting. I think I'm trying to, especially going into this year, like I still enjoy posting about books because I do get a lot of people who maybe don't read as often that will actually try a book that I've recommended or they've seen. And that's quite a nice feeling, but I'm trying to be less, I don't know, not fall into the trap of rushing to get a review out or rushing to read a book, because sometimes I'll almost look at the page numbers and be like, okay, I've got X amount left, I can finish this, that means tomorrow I can post the review, then the next day it means I can start this other book that I need to read because I need to get that onto Twitter, blah 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 blah. You kind of spiral, whereas you're not actually enjoying the moment of the book, you're not kind of feeling it, you're not processing how it's making you think, how your emotional response to the book is being dealt with. And I think that's something that's kind of lost a little bit for the last few years, because it's been too obsessed with, I think, this idea of just sharing and putting it on social media and giving it to people. But then, like you say, I think there should be sort of a reclaiming of reading in privacy and keeping your thoughts to yourself, or like people that you can talk to and have conversations with, like book clubs and things, but then not displaying it for the whole world to see. And that's really kind of one of my objectives. Like, don't sort of rush read through your to be read list just to get more followers, or like just to increase how I look. Like, he's read X amount of books so far, wow, isn't that good? Like, there's a whole conversation about Goodreads, and like it's not good because you're in competition with yourself and you're seeing stats. And so in a very long roundabout way answer, yes, I completely agree with you.
I totally get it though. Because I think you're really on the money when you talk about like how it makes you look, like and by the way, we're talking about like private reading and sharing less of your opinions on a fucking book podcast. Like, we get it, we understand, you don't need to tell us. This
is meta as hell. Like, we get it, like we're being dickheads about it, we know. But I think sometimes you have to look inwards and be sort of introspective about it. Yeah. And know, we're part of this machine. Yeah. And we're part of this, system. And
I think that there's, as I was saying, this idea of like how you look, crafting the persona of a reader instead of kind of, reading for yourself as a personal experience, enjoying books in the moment, and then sharing them as a kind of add-on, rather than, and I think, you know, and I have absolutely no judgment for anybody, however they engage with, you know, books and social media. You know, it's up to you. If it makes you happy and it feels healthy and organic to you, then that's absolutely fine. But I've definitely noticed in myself over the past couple of years this idea of read the book in order to get to the end of the book and then have an opinion on it, as you were saying, you know, as opposed to going through the book and just enjoying it for itself. Like, for example, a couple of books I read last year really quickly, Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead and Giovanni's Room, two of the most incredible books I've ever read in my entire life. And I genuinely think that part of the reason I enjoyed them so much and part of the reason I felt so just compulsively kind of into them was because I wasn't sharing the fact that I was reading them. And I know that sounds weird and it sounds sounds completely silly, but this idea that, and they're both really beautifully written. They're just both really good books, by the way. Here's my tiny
Giovanni's
review.
Room is fucking incredible.
So good, right? Like, here's my tiny review for them. Read both of them. They're masterpieces. Anyway, so yeah,
the end.
Yeah, the end. That's it. That's all I'll say about them. I might bring them up someday in a different podcast, but yeah, the fact that I was enjoying them completely in private actually, I think, lent a sort of deliciousness and a sort of almost illicitness. Like, you know, they were my little secret. Nobody knew about these books. And so yeah, and you know, it's just my experience, but I do think that we share a similar experience, and maybe other people out there listening have kind of, I think we get, like you say, we get kind of into this little kind of rat race of book reviewing and the persona of being a reader and accumulating books and proofs, and, you know, having to have an opinion on every single literary nonsense, like dogpiling trash fire that happens on social media, that we forget exactly what that kind of core little ember is, which is how much we love books. So yeah, I think this year is a journey to kind of really rediscover that and really embrace that, you know, back to basics, organic experience of just reading and loving it.
I agree. Completely agree. I think it was really good what you said there about relishing in that privacy of it's yours. Like, I read Open Water recently, which I've had since February 2020. So nearly 2 years I've had it. But I just haven't got around to reading it. And then I thought, you know what? What's stopping you? That's another thing as well. Just what's stopping you when you go, oh, I need to read that. Why don't you? There's always some sort of excuse. And I read it, and it's only like 160 odd pages, but there were just moments where I just had to put it down and just really take in the gorgeousness of what he was saying, like the author was saying. And, you know, when you just think, fucking hell, what a great sentence. Like, I was doing that every other page, but again, I wasn't sort of tweeting it or writing it down to be like, I need to use that as a quote. It was just like, bloody hell. Like, imagine just being your debut novel and it's that good. Like, and you really think about it.
Don't you hate those people?
Oh God, the worst. But this is the thing though, taking that time to really be like, bloody hell, well done you, rather than being like, skim read. Oh yeah, that was good. Next. Like, actually thinking.
I think in some ways we sort of interrupt that. So for me, I don't know how this is possibly a bit of a poncy thing to say, but like, reading is by definition a kind of intimate dialogue between the author and the reader. Like, they've made a thing and then you are kind of re-consuming the thing, and kind of,
well, you're opening it up, aren't you? You're like, you open something up to have a look inside, so that's innately quite personal.
There is something like kind of intimate, this, like, you know, the two of you in a little cubby room together kind of sharing this story. And I do wonder about the kind of implications of this way that we endlessly will just quickly flash it, you know, we'll quickly open the door to anyone who's walking past to be like, look what's happening. So yeah, anyway, but I think another really cool thing about this idea of, you know, not feeling compelled to kind of share or to kind of to, you know, board the hype train choo choo every 5 seconds is that we can go back to some of the books that we were really excited about and then kind of just let slide off of our priority lists. So I think that this is something that you've mentioned is a priority for you as well, and that's getting through like the backlist titles that came out 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and obviously some classics as well. That, you know, at some point you were desperate to read that. At some point that really called to your soul, but it's just been sort of buried in this mountain of other things that have come out. And I think, stripping back and honing down which books actually are speaking to you on like a primal level.
Yeah.
And flipping reading them.
Yeah, just actually getting them read rather than putting it off. And I think as well, it's just a case of doing it because you think there's always something stopping you. Because you can still read
Mostly
something.
TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can still read something, but it's like, well, why not that particular book? Like I've made a sort of mission to myself of basically not to buy books for as long as I can, unless there's one that I'm desperate for. But as you know, also working in the publishing industry, being sent proofs is a lovely thing, but sometimes it can be very overwhelming because you've got this stack of proofs and you've got their dates on the spines and you're like, oh God, there's only a month till that comes out and I still haven't read it yet.
Or in my case, oh, that's been out a while, hasn't it? Whoops. Yeah, but I get what you mean. And there's a feeling of, there is a feeling of guilt because ultimately they've sent you that because they think you'll love it. And I think one of my sort of mini goals is to just not request proofs unless I know I really want to read them. So
Exactly.
And I haven't been I still get a couple here and there because I'm on mailing lists or I know people, but I'm making a really solemn vow to myself to not waste somebody's proof if I know in my heart of hearts that the cover's pretty and it sounds nice, but I'm not going to get to it. Because ultimately, that's kind of money down the publisher's drain, right? You know, we both work in the publishing industry. You know, proofs are free. Proofs are not meant to be sent with any kind of obligation. That's fine. But I don't want to be wasting people's hard-earned margins on the creation of their proofs, when actually I'm probably not the best person it could go to, and it could go to someone who will definitely read it and definitely love it.
And it's just that way of being fair about it as well. Like you say, like I'm not going to take someone's spot that would absolutely die at a chance to read this proof, whereas I would love to maybe at some point down the line, but I won't have the time now for it and I can't commit to that. So it's all, in a way, I guess it's almost like saying no as well, like in a very polite, respectful way, saying thank you very much, but not right now.
Yeah, I've turned down a couple of proofs, and it's always really difficult because you're like, thank you so much for thinking of me and my humble nonsense. It's really kind of you, but I'm not really doing social media at the moment, and so this is just a waste of your resources. But in the end, I feel good about it because the thing is, if I want that book, you know, I work full time. I earn a decent living. I can go buy it. You know, I can support the book industry with my money, which, no offense, everybody, is actually the best way to support the industry.
Yeah, completely agree. Because we all need to make a profit, baby girl. We all need to make a profit.
Yeah.
So
counting them Benjamins.
Exactly, counting our pennies. Another thing that I'm really sort of trying to hone in on is expanding my genres, because I'd like to say I'm quite eclectic with my tastes, but I do tend to stick to like very like literary fiction. It's, you know, fine. But because I know you are such a massive fan of like sci-fi fantasy, and I do enjoy it, but I just don't read a lot in that genre, I've made a kind of point to be like, do you know what, actually go back and just get stuck in. And I'll get to... go on.
I can't tell you how excited I am to hear you say that. I'm really sorry. You're never going to hear the fucking end of it from me. I'm going to make you read all of the fantasy
That's fine. Because I think having something that's so drastically different to what I'm used to is maybe what I need right now, because there can be maybe fatigue with the certain amount of books that you read. So you just need something that's completely different. And I'll get to this with one of my picks for 2022, but that's a very old book, but it's a sci-fi book, and you know, no spoilers just yet, I'll get to it soon. But I bought this book because I sat down and said, I want to read this because I want to expand my horizons and get into this genre. Whether, you know, nothing's holding you back this time, like what have you got to lose, basically?
Yeah. And it can be intimidating, but at the same time, like, there is so, like, there's a lot of garbage out there in every genre, including fantasy. But I think that there's some real gold. So we'll talk about that. Maybe we can chronicle over our episodes Kieran's journey into fantasy, and we can see what you like. And I'm intending to do something kind of similar, not necessarily because I probably read. This might sound silly, but I kind of read all the genres I already like. You know, I've tried crime, not a huge fan. You know, I've read some romance, and it didn't really get. You know, there's good stuff out there. but it's not stuff I want to like really like chew on. But part of my intentions this year is to kind of expand. It's more of a depth thing, so less breadth, less exploring more widely and more diving deeper into genres that I've kind of tapped and really enjoyed, but haven't really kind of explored yet. So I think one in particular that I am excited for is autofiction.
Okay.
Yeah, I've obviously read bits and pieces of autofiction. I've read Rachel Cusk. I've read a little bit of Annie Ernaux. I've read some Violette Leduc, and with some exceptions. As a general, I find it a really...
Could you define autofiction for me?
Yeah. So it's essentially when somebody kind of novelizes their personal experiences, and so they might in some way remove themselves. So they'll be telling a sort of third-person story about a person who's nothing like them, but goes through the same experience, or they might in some way... Or they might create a character in their own image who then goes through a sort of parallel experience to what they did. It's kind of a fluid, kind of messy genre, but essentially it's somebody creating a fictional-ish account. Fictional-ish is probably a good word for it. A fictional-ish account of themselves as a person or as a set of experiences. I've read some bits and pieces, and actually, even though I haven't necessarily gotten along with all writers, I've really enjoyed the genre, and so I'm really excited to kind of dive back into that. I've enjoyed a lot of memoirs recently. Just exploring and kind of pulling apart, because you sort of hit the top layer when you try a new form or a new kind of genre, and so I'm looking forward to kind of peeling back those like crusty surface layers to find like the good sweet nectar beneath from these sorts of things.
Funny you saying about memoir. Annoyingly, is annoyingly the right word? I don't know. The first book I read this year was a memoir-ish, kind of twisted, and it's fucking astounding. Like, I think one of the best books I've read in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not one of my picks, but I'm just going to briefly mention it here. In the Dream House, Carmen Maria Machado,
I think it is.
Machado. Apologies to Carmen if you're listening and I butcher your name. But my God... I don't know if you've read it, but...
I haven't. I've read some of her short stories, which I did enjoy. But again, that's the sort of thing that I would want to get back to now.
Yeah, I think you would absolutely love it. Just the way that the memoir as like a form is completely ripped apart, and those threads are just so closely looked at, but then interweaving stuff like film theory, queer theory, it blew my mind. Like every single, because the idea is that there are chapters or like facets entitled Dream House as, and it's all through different lenses, and each one in some way, shape or form got me in terms of like just being astounded or emotional, but so original, like truly unlike anything else I've ever read. Oof. And like, I wasn't even exaggerating when I said one of the best things I've read in my life. It truly was. And that was the 4th, 5th of January. And I'm like, well, 2022 better have a good year of reading, because I don't know if anything's going to live up to this.
Yeah. But please don't let that be the peak. Please don't let that be the peak. Oh, God, it might be the peak. Exactly.
But sorry for sort of going off on a bit of a tangent.
No, cool. Just writing that down.
Yeah, please do. I think that's pretty much me in terms of my sort of outlines, because we've got the, maybe taking a step back from the sort of theatricality, performance style nature of social media, going back and looking at books we've maybe had for a while and really getting into there, but also expanding horizons, but also taking a deeper dive into the genres that we like. I almost feel like we need to get these written down and put in like a time capsule for a year's time to revisit.
Yes. Well, you've got a garden. We'll dig them back up in your garden. We'll bury them in your garden, and then we'll dig them back up in a year's time, and we'll be like, oh, well, never mind.
Exactly. I will get my shovel. I don't have a shovel.
I'll bring the shovel. You can provide the garden.
Perfect. Shall we move on to our top picks for 2022. I was going to do a little trumpet thing there, but I don't have a trumpet either. Would you like to kick us off, friend?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. So the first book that I've chosen, and I own all 3 of these books, but they're all bought, well, 2 of them are bought recently and one of them, yikes, let's just say that. So the first one I've picked is Motherhood by Sheila Heti. And this is, funnily enough, autofiction.
Okay.
And this is about a woman kind of in her late 30s. And when you're in your late 30s, you're obviously at the stage where it's kind of effectively like now or never for children and for becoming a mother. And she sort of, to my knowledge, has to kind of confront the fact that you can't just dither on the question anymore. Like you have to, or you have to not. You know, you have to make that decision. And so it kind of follows her over the course of a few years as this decision becomes more and more pressing, and as various kind of family members and friends try to sort of influence her decision, as she kind of seeks wisdom from literature and from kind of social theories, and tries to kind of search within herself and her own interiority to try and work out what she actually wants. There's the first quote, or there's a quote on the back, I think it is, whether I wanted to have children was a secret that I kept, even from myself. And I find that really interesting, this idea that, you know, the answer must be in there somewhere, like why can't she find it? And I think it's a lot about trying to kind of learn to speak a new language, or trying to reframe how she thinks about children, to sort of search out what the answer is in herself, which is quite exciting. And so I think I'm going to love this because essentially it's about a topic that I really love to see, which is how motherhood isn't really something, at least when you're like a cis woman, expected to like question or weigh up. You know, it's not something you're supposed to really think about at all. I think you're kind of expected like, well, you know, you're a woman, of course you want children.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a given, isn't it?
Yeah, so you slide into motherhood kind of whether you're ready or not, whether you really wanted it or not. And I think that is something that maybe we need to talk about a little bit, and we kind of as a society need to come to terms with that, you know, not everybody wants to.
We've had conversations about it, haven't we? Like we've talked about it quite a lot, just sort of as friends. Yeah,
like the complications of like, okay, but what do we want? And so and as I said before, autofiction and memoir have become this kind of massive part of my reading. So in the last couple of years, I've read The Crying Book by Heather Crissell, and we've both read The Lonely City by Olivia Lang, which are both, I think, kind of finding solace in, my reading experiences of them have been very much about finding solace in these other women who are trying to find their way in the world, but maybe acting a little bit differently, or kind of skewing off the traditional path, and really thinking about who they are and what they want, rather than kind of sliding into the molds that society's created. And I kind of want to stress that this isn't like, I don't really judge people who have like made traditional choices, but I'm always, because actually when you decide that maybe you don't want to do all of the obvious things, you're kind of left with this kind of sort of vacuum, like, okay, well then how do you fill your life with meaning when you might not do kind of all of these natural kind of the natural human progressions? And so I think that's what I'm going to find really interesting, is watching somebody else kind of work to find meaning in their own life when they have decided that they maybe don't want children. That's something I'm really interested to kind of watch and see what she does with it. I had a quick look at Goodreads because I wanted to kind of get an idea of maybe the tone of the book before I started, and I was really interested in how polarizing it was. There were a lot of really raving reviews, 5 stars, people absolutely loving it. And I was really fascinating to see a lot of quite low star reviews, like literally 1 and 2 stars.
Wow,
and
that's
they seemed, I was fascinated because some of them, I'll be honest, I only skimmed them because I didn't want to spoil myself, but some of them felt like they maybe felt a little bit seen or attacked by maybe some of the slightly inflammatory things that Sheila Heti's going to say. So I'll look forward to seeing those.
Okay.
And then there were others that kind of were talking about how the narrator is navel-gazy and she's privileged and she's self-absorbed. And like, honestly, same. So I don't think that's going to bother me, to be honest.
You're kind of like, oh, it is what it is. Like that's me.
Yeah, it's like, well, if I can't own myself, then who will? So yeah, that's something I'm really really interested to read, and actually I might start reading that this evening, maybe.
Ooh, no time like the present.
Yeah. So what have you got to read?
I have got. I'm gonna kickstart with the book I teased earlier on, which is Dune by Frank Herbert.
Nice,
one of the most famous sort of sci-fi fantasy books in recent years. But everyone that I've always spoken to, especially in the bookseller days, always said it was basically impenetrable. It was just, you couldn't get through it.
So you're giving yourself a really soft start, really gently does it into the kiddie pool, entry into sci-fi fantasy. Cool, excellent,
exactly.
Great.
But the whole reason why was because last year the film came out and I knew nothing about it. Even the trailers didn't give me much in terms of plot, but I'm like, hey, it's Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, let's go.
Yeah.
But what completely blew me away was the sheer, and I know, obviously credit to the filmmaker and the crew, production team, but this world and scope that Frank Herbert created, and like the lore and the mythos and everything from sort of the ground upwards, I was just fascinated by. And I haven't had that feeling since maybe watching Lord of the Rings and then reading Lord of the Rings, watching Star Wars, and kind of being completely immersed into this world that I didn't want to leave. And that for me was the kind of, right, okay, you need to now go and read the book. And because the film, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the film, but basically the film ends halfway through the book, the first book. And it does end quite abruptly. Like, it's literally kind of like and it just ends, and you're like, oh, okay then, part 2 soon, maybe.
Did you sit there and wait for an after credit scene because you've seen so many Marvel movies? You were just there like, there'll definitely be one.
It was long enough, so I knew it didn't have one, but because it ended with like sort of the title sort of Dune, and then like the sand sort of went away and it said part 1, and everyone kind of went, oh, okay, there we go.
Everybody groaned and got up.
Yeah, like, grab your coat, Karen, that was shit. But I just was so absorbed into this kind of world, and there was so much more I wanted to find out. I didn't leave going, that was fine, I wouldn't want to go back. But I was like, I'm desperate to go back and find out more about the characters and how they source spice. Because I don't know how many books there are in the series. I think there's like 9 or something like that. It's a very long series, but I think the first was 65, I think.
It's quite a long one, isn't it?
Like you say, I probably haven't given myself the easiest task of, jumping in the kiddie pool of sci-fi, but it's just stayed in my head ever since watching the film. And it was almost like when you were little and you watched something that was based on a book or, short story collection or something, and it was like, right, okay, I need to read the book now. And I haven't had that feeling in such a long time. That kind of gave me the kick up the bum to be like, right, let's go and read it. And plus, it didn't help that at the same time, Waterstones released this exclusive fancy edition, which I've got here, which obviously listeners won't be able to see, but I'm going to show Isabelle, like, and
ooh, ha! You're missing out, idiots. No, describe it.
This is good. This is good shit right here. This is really good shit. And some lovely end papers as well.
That looks like I'm not going to say what that looks like.
A butthole, I know. It's a sandworm, everyone. Get your mind out of the gutter. But that for me was another kind of selling point. I was like, okay, it's a fancy collector's edition. I do like collecting stuff. Again, it's that kind of, well, you now need to read it because you've spent however much money on it. So there it is. I don't know if you've ever read or attempted to read it. I know there's that famous 1980s version of the film, which is apparently awful, which everyone tells me to avoid like the plague.
Yeah, no, I haven't actually. I think because it's more sci-fi than it is fantasy, although I think I recognise that, it's supposed to be incredible. It was the sort of thing that you were kind of like, yeah, I might, and then you just don't. But yeah, I'm probably more on the fantasy side than I am sci-fi, so yeah, mad respect for you jumping in. It's such a let's say, mad respect for you to jump into a tome that I myself am slightly intimidated by. So, yeah. I would be fascinated to see how you go for it. You might absolutely love it. You might just get absolutely swept away.
So I will report back, of course. But
yeah, that's all right. If you decide you hate it, I'll get you some Terry Pratchett, and you can
we've
just
had
kind
so
of
many
soothe
conversations
yourself with
about Terry
that.
Pratchett. Like, I just know that I would fall into it and absolutely love it. So I know that, you know, I wouldn't be
entirely one-sided
at all there. So that's my first pick. We'll report back ASAP. Or if I really can't feel it, I might just watch the film again and be like, yeah, I totally read it. Wink, wink.
Yes.
Choice number 2, Isabelle.
Yeah, okay, so this is Lot by Schola von Reinhold. I really hope that's how you pronounce their name. And this was published by Jacaranda as part of a sort of 2020 or 20 in 20 Black Authors project, which is really cool. So they obviously released 20 Black authors, I think, debut novels in 2020. You've got to kind of feel a little bit bad for the fact that they all were then released like in the thick of lockdown, but still really, really cool. And so this is one of the ones that I think has kind of called to me the most, and it's about a young Black woman called Matilda who's obsessed with this idea of the Bright Young Things, which is this group of kind of bohemian, artsy socialites in the 20s. It included Evelyn Waugh, Sylvia Townsend Warner, the Mitfords, that kind of crowd. And she obviously is obsessed with these like this entirely white group of people as a Black woman, and so it's kind of this slight disconnect until she discovers a photo of a lost Black modernist poet called Hermia, who seems to have been sort of forgotten and left out of this kind of illustrious group that she was part of. And she essentially sets off on this escapade to learn all about this woman and why she's not remembered anymore. And it sounds incredible. So to go all kind of Gen Z on you, I really like Dark Academia.
I still don't know what Dark Academia is, but I see the hashtag all over Instagram and TikTok.
Don't you panic, you're better off not knowing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like dark, thrilling, semi-thriller fiction tending to base around kind of artsy students at university.
Right,
so the Secret History is kind of the OG, but a lot of stuff gets tied in, like, you know, Gothic classics and other things. So this kind of sounds like, so with Dark Academia, the kind of broad sort of neo genre, if you like, it's often criticised for being very, very white, very Eurocentric, very kind of Western, which is completely fair. A lot of the time it is, because these people live and work and study in an academic elite, which is always going to be kind of entrenched in kind of white supremacist ideas, not only kind of in the sort of general attitudes of the staff, but also in the material that they're learning about. So for me, this sounds like a really interesting entry into that genre, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot about interrogating the absence of Black and other kind of non-white art from our understanding of literary history and artistic history. And I think that's something that I'm going to find really exciting. It sounds really cool and very weird. Again, I had a quick skim on Goodreads, and there's a lot of contention.
Oh no!
But it seems to be it seems to be split very much into people going, I didn't get it, and a lot of people going, oh, I got it too much. Oh, I love it so much. So I'm really hoping I'm going to be in that second camp. A couple of people said they
rather than Camp A.
Yeah, I think a lot of people said they found it a bit dry and a bit dull. But then other people have said it was really funny, so I've got no clue what's going on there. We'll find out.
Interesting.
And yeah, so this is one that I picked up ages and ages ago. I actually picked this up in 2020 during lockdown. It's got the most gorgeous cover, by the way. If you Google LOTE, you'll see it. It's absolutely beautiful. And I was quite nervous to read it because I felt like, because of its sort of academic themes, I would have to be in a sort of clever headspace. So I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. And I felt like I was kind of hopping on like the train early with that one, but now it's won the James Tate Prize and the Republic of Consciousness Prize. So I am behind the curve. Everyone else has read it but me. So that's my plan, is to go back to that one and catch up, because I think it's going to be incredible.
It sounds amazing. It sounds right up my cup of tea. My cup of tea?
Right up your cup of tea.
Right up my cup of tea. I tried to mix the analogies and got confused. But yes, it does sound right up my cup of tea. I like that idea of like socialite history being explored and there's secrets to be discovered, and like you say, that absence of like otherness is quite interesting, especially in history when we tend to sort of look back and romanticize. It is predominantly like an all-white sort of group in history.
Yeah. And then you kind of but it's funny because then you learn, well, for as long as white people / men / whoever have been writing, non-white people / women / whoever have been writing for exactly as long. The only difference is their work doesn't get preserved because it's not respected. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just really interested to kind of read a book about that sort of thing. And yeah, it just sounds like a wild ride. You know, it mentions like art theft and secret societies and little kind of communes. So yeah, I will report back.
So my next pick of 2022 is Good Intentions by Qasim Ali. And this is a book that's out in March, I believe. I was very kindly sent a proof. The funny story is that I actually met Qasim a year ago when I was temping at Penguin, because he works for Del Rey, which is the sci-fi fantasy imprint. And I remember him sort of telling me about him writing. I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, didn't really think anything of it. And then it blows up everywhere at Fourth Estate, this book. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, how bad is that? Like,
and he wrote it in 6 weeks. Like, he wrote this.
What?
I know.
Fuck off.
I know. I told him multiple times. Like, how dare you? How dare you?
Wow, that's really cool. Absolutely mad that you're just like, oh yeah, this is my friend, and then you're seeing a book. You know when you see a book ever and you're like, this must be a big deal, and you're like, hang on a second.
Yeah,
I know that author. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's like being like my friend. So this is it. Good Intentions. Cute little proof there. And it tells the story of Nur, who is a young British Pakistani man who is in a relationship with Yasmina. And it's going really well, really, like, he wants to kind of be there for her and sort of prove himself more. But the problem is that he is obviously very indebted to his family, obviously being British Pakistani. But at the same time, they don't know about her because she's black.
Ooh,
and what it does
is cool.
He wants to be a good son to his parents, but he wants to be a good boyfriend to Yasmina. And it's this idea of like, even with sort of minority communities, there's still racism and there's still kind of prejudice there. And essentially this is like a love story, but about loyalties as well, about family kind of protection, and also kind of when you want the best for someone, what do you do? Like what pressure is put on you to try and appease both sides? And it sounds like it's a really interesting way of looking at modern relationships from so many different angles and kind of twisting on its head that expectation of a love story, like looking at immigrant obligation, racial prejudice. I just think it's really interesting and something that's very rarely been done in terms of looking at like relationships, but also kind of, it's always normally someone of colour and someone who's white, and that's kind of the big deal.
Yeah, totally.
But very rarely has it been when, you know, both parties are people of colour and, like you sort of said earlier, an other, and yet there's still that hesitation, there's still that kind of pushback on that. I just think it's really interesting. And
such a worthy topic to look at as well, because I think you're completely right. Even in sort of adverts, you know, you see like a DFS sofa advert or whatever, and if it's a mixed race couple, it's always a white person and a non-white person. And I think you're so right to talk about the idea that just because you're both, you know, people of colour, doesn't mean that, you know, you naturally fall on like on a sort of a side of allyship, you know, if that makes sense. It's not a case of like, oh, we're all in this together. Often, you know, because both sides have come from oppression and have experienced, you know, their own different kinds of racial trauma. Often I think division is even more tense because it's neither one of you has the kind of this space to step back and be like, I'm not affected at all by racism. You know, you both sides end up kind of tussling in this kind of like, well, we both have different but very, very powerful, painful experiences of being, you know, being a person of colour. And so a lot of the time I think that then gets projected onto other non-white people. And obviously it's a little bit like class, you know. So if the people at the top can convince the people below them that each other is the problem, then they get to kind of walk away and dust their hands off. So yeah, that sounds so good.
Really good. And something just popped into my head there when we spoke last year about detransition baby, and we spoke about like, the term the Minority Olympics. And it popped into my head because it's like you said, this idea of when you've got two sets of families that aren't, you know, that are still very different, and yet a white society would lump them into the same category and expect them to kind of fight amongst themselves.
Yeah, totally.
When they've still got their own struggles and attitudes to overcome. Especially I think with Nur being like British Pakistani and kind of family obligations, and sort of they set out the path that he should follow. And he doesn't want to go against that. And traditionally, you know, when that's in a relationship where another person's white, it's almost like, oh yeah, that's kind of expected. That's something we see and hear often. But then when it's against someone who's also a person of colour, your kind of natural instinct is to go, oh, it's a jarring situation, and I guess can make people uncomfortable, but I think that's also the point. These books should be, you know, starting points for conversations, and engaging in the society that we are living in today, that is, you know, sadly going through so many horrible situations of racism and, you know, so much more, and issues about immigration as well. And I know, and Kasim's so passionate about having underrepresented voices in the industry as well. Again, working in the industry as well. And he's not afraid to, you know, really be passionate online as well and really vocalize his beliefs. And that's what I really appreciate about him, and really I find quite moving about him and his book as well. Like, he dedicated it to his grandparents, who he even said the other day kind of really helped pave him as the person he is today. And as someone, you know, being mixed race myself, it's always really interesting to kind of see that representation in books now, whereas when I was younger, I didn't really have that. So that's like another sort of reason why I want to read it as well, because I'm like, yes, just I get to see myself within these books. And yeah, Good Intentions is out on the 3rd of March, and I cannot wait to get stuck in. And I'm sure Kasim will be desperate for me to feed him WhatsApp updates on the hour, every hour when I am reading it.
You can live tweet it at him. No, throw all that stuff about not reading publicly to the wind, and just fully, like, you know, updates every 3 pages.
Yeah, an exclusive live read along on Instagram, but it's just me and him. Not awkward at all.
He's just sat there like, Kieran, I've needed to go to the bathroom for about half an hour. I can't anymore.
You stay there, you. And your third and final choice, my liege?
So my last choice is back on the kind of memoir train. Memoir train.
Choo-choo.
Memoir train. M-train.
Hey.
Ooh,
hey. I saw what you did there. I saw what you were doing.
I feel like if I'd done it on purpose, it would have been smarter. Anyway, so this is M-Train by Patti Smith. It's one of Patti Smith's memoirs. For anyone who doesn't know, Patti Smith is a singer-songwriter. You probably know her best. If you don't know who she is, you probably have heard the song Because the Night, which I will not sing here, but it goes, because the night belongs to lovers, blah, blah, blah.
You're not singing? What?
A court order says I mustn't.
Yeah.
So, but she's also an author and a poet, and she's kind of famous and well known and really kind of avowed for fusing these kind of beautiful, emotive, poetic lyrics into her rock music. So she's written a couple of memoirs because she's had an absolutely crazy, interesting life. I think her most famous one is Just Kids. She's also written The Year of the Monkey. I picked this one pretty much because I saw it in a bookshop, and I remember a lot of people telling me I should buy it. And this is essentially, M Train is essentially a walking tour of her kind of creative process. So we look at the cafes and hotel rooms and other places where she's had to kind of create art. She's either gone to a cafe because she loves it there and she finds it really inspirational, or she's had to write in a cafe because it's literally the only place where she has a table. And the kind of the different ways in which that her acts of creation are affected by where she goes. So they travel to New York, they travel to Iceland, they travel to Mexico, and we basically follow her through this beautiful depiction of her life as this artistic adventurer. And honestly, I know basically nothing else about it, but it's been recommended to me over and over again. There's a quote that really resonates me with that goes, "Life is at the bottom of things, belief is at the top. The creative impulse dwelling in the centre informs all." And I've been told that's from this book. So, it feels like, that quote for me is, I don't know, it means something quite kind of weirdly deep and sort of like chemical to who I feel like I am as a person. And so I feel like I should read the book that it's from. I think it's going to be a book that I can just really sink into, a book that's probably going to make me feel really inspired to go and like travel and write in different places and explore the world, and then really sad because COVID. But who knows? Maybe by the time I get around to this, or maybe at some point this year, it will be easier and more free and safer to go and kind of see the world and follow Patti Smith's footsteps. So yeah, that's really all I've got for M Train. I'm really excited about it, but because I know so little about it, I'm kind of like, this will be good.
Ta-da!
So yeah, that's M Train for you.
I've read M Train and I can't remember it. Not in a bad way, but I remember loving it. And
yeah.
I think there's an anecdote about she goes to a cafe and there's a particular table that she likes. And there's one day where someone's at the table and she's like,
sacrilege.
Yeah, and she's like, I can't write today because I'm not at my space. And I really felt that when you go into a cafe or something like that and you have a particular favourite seat or area, and if it's taken up, you do feel a bit sheepish, like, well, I can't just stay and not sit there. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Oh my God. So once, this is complete tangent, I apologise, but I was at a cafe, I think it might have been in Ole and Steen, and I was writing, just kind of doing my thing, and one of the baristas came over to me and like leaned in and went, "Oh, what are you writing?" And I was literally like, what the fuck? And so I was just like, "Oh, I'm just working." Yeah. And then they were like, "Oh, that's cool. I hope it's going well," and left that. And it was a lovely, friendly, charming, nice, perfectly harmless thing to do. And now I can't go back there because somebody spoke to me while I was having my own personal time. So that's so I go to a different.
That's such a you thing to happen as well.
I know. It's like,
like proper
it was
deer
like,
in the headlights moment, like.
Oh, yes, other people exist in the world. Oh, hello, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, sorry.
So that's M Train. I feel like you should now write your own memoir about these experiences, but just call it what's the London Transport, the Thames Link thing called? Not the DFL. What's it called?
The DLR.
The DLR. That's it.
Docklands Light Railway. Yeah.
Yeah. Not as striking as M Train, but I feel like there's
or
something...
maybe just like the I Circle line. But basically, a beautiful memoir of me desperately trying to avoid people while being in public.
I'd read it.
Yeah. I'd write it. There you go.
Done. You sold one copy. I know I've spoken about it before in a previous episode, but I do think you would enjoy Crying in H Mart as well, in terms of memoir. Again, it would make you feel a bit sad, but
I'm up for some sad. It's fine.
Yeah, that's a rollicking good memoir. Like, really, really enjoy that. Especially if you are sort of deep diving. I already want to go back and reread. And the paperback's out soon. So plug. So I'm going to get on to my last pick, which is... Let me get to my notes. So it's Emily Pine's Ruth and Pen.
Oh my God, she wrote notes
to
on
self.
Notes to self. Oh my God, that's so good.
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That was the exact same reaction when I found out she was writing a new book.
Just a yawp of excitement.
That's a great word, yawp.
Yawp. A barbaric yawp.
A barbaric yawp. Oh, you're on fire.
It's from Dead Poets Society. I can't take credit for that.
Oh, I love it. So yeah, this is her debut fiction novel, and Emily Pine is the best-selling author of Notes to Self, which is a book I read a good few years ago and fucking adored. I think I actually recommended it to you, didn't I? I'm sure I was reading it and I recommended it to you, and then you started reading it, and then you actually overtook me because you said you stayed up late one night just blitzing it.
Yeah. You started it. You said it was great. I started it and I literally read it in one night. I finished at 4 a.m. I'd cried, and I never cry at books. So yes, yeah, absolutely.
I remember that very vividly. So Notes to Self was just an incredible essay collection about many facets of her life, of dealing with like her body, the issue of having children, looking after her alcoholic father, but just the way that she wrote these essays broke me in half, but also just there was just something wonderful there as well that I could not put it down, and it spoke to, I think, a lot of people, and it really had that emotional resonance, and I recommended the book to so many people. So I found out she was doing a fiction book and then got very excited, and it's called Ruth and Pen, and it's described as this like tender-hearted and sort of candid look of two women that live in Dublin. They're quite rich, and it's basically tracing their lives across a single day. And that's all I know in terms of like the premise. But I'm just so excited for this because of her writing, of how personal and how engaging Notes to Self was. And I don't think, as sad as it was, I don't think it ever became like too bleak. Like there wasn't a point where I thought, this is too much for me, I need to put it down.
It never got to the point where it's sort of, you'd kind of dried up a little bit, if that makes sense. You were always kept kind of... You were always kept kind of hooked on what was going on, as opposed to going, okay, this is too sad now.
Yeah, completely. And I am interested in how the transition from non-fiction to fiction will go, because we've seen this trend a lot recently with like Lisa Tredo's 3 Women. Then she wrote Animal, which I bought but I still haven't read. It's quite a common theme and sort of trend in publishing at the moment, but I don't really have any doubts that this will be bloody success because of how wonderful her writing is, and I think the premise is quite simple but also one that can work really, really well. Something that I am interested in is, because obviously she's Irish and this is going to be like Irish fiction, and the immediate comparison will of course be the runester herself, Sally Rooney, who some people kind of argue, she's really put the mark on like Irish fiction. I'm not going to get into our thoughts about Sally Rooney because I'm sure she's a lovely person, but just it's not for me. So it'll be interesting to kind of see the response, because Sally, was she around when this came out? I can't remember.
Yeah, she definitely was. Like,
she was.
I think Conversations with Friends for sure predates Notes to Self.
Yeah,
I don't know if Normal People
because Normal People came second. That's it. But she hadn't blew up. She hadn't blew up then, had she?
Yeah, not quite. I think it might be the same year that Normal People was the Woodstones Book of the Year. But yeah, I get exactly what you're talking about. Like, I think because Sally Rooney is such an icon now, there's a kind of expectation that everything that gets published from Irish women writers will sort of echo it a little bit and will sort of be in conversation. And I feel a little bit bad because Sally Rooney's fine, but I think if you were an Irish woman writing something quite different and you take your work quite seriously, I think it would probably be kind of annoying to find that you've got that instant comparison right there. Yeah, you would either be different from Sally Rooney or the same as Sally Rooney, as opposed to being able to, you'd always be in relation to this other person who maybe you might enjoy, you might not, you might respect, but you don't necessarily want to be in this kind of involuntary constant comparison with. And that's not Sally Rooney's fault, not at all, but it's just kind of how our kind of media has sort of kind created this lump of books, I think.
Yeah, there's kind of this discourse of being compared.
The discourse. Yeah.
I again, another tangent, but I sent my friend like an emoji thing saying, oh, the discourse is real, but I literally put the emoji like disc then a horse. I was like, the is real, and he was like, what's that meant to mean? I was like, oh, it's discourse. Come on,
man.
Read the emojis. It's not that cryptic.
Sound it out.
Do what the kids do. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Notes to Self was such a wonderful book. For me, kind of had that same emotional pull as Maggie Nelson's Bluets, which is such a special book and one that's very close to my heart. And it kind of navigated the same sort of spectrum, I guess. I don't know what the right word is there, but
yeah, that kind of the same realms.
Yeah,
I guess
that's it. Realms, definitely. So very much looking forward to that. And I've realised that concludes my list. For
mine too.
Top picks of 2022. So, because we're not afraid of a shameless plug and an AKA publishing pick, we are now going to choose one book from our retrospective work to highlight, show off, and basically say why it's amazing and why you should read it. Isabelle, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, so just for any context, just in case this is your first ever time coming across either of us as human beings, we both work in publishing. Kieran is comms assistant for Picador, the Beyonce publishing, and I am marketing and editorial lead at Gallet Books, which is a cool little indie press. So we work in very, very different kind of aspects of publishing, but we have very similar taste, which is kind of interesting. So yes, my book that I'm really excited for, that I've actually, I'm not just working on it, I chose to publish it. It was the first thing I picked for acquisition in my role in editorial, is The Swimmers by Chloe Lane. The Swimmers is a New Zealand debut. It was longlisted for their kind of most prestigious literary prize, the Ockham Fiction Award. And it's essentially about a messy, spiky, grumpy 26-year-old fuck-up called Erin. An affair has just blown up in her face. Her career has nosedived. And she finds herself kind of trudging back home to her kind of family house, where she has to be with her sort of annoying, cloying aunt, her sort of slow, dopey uncle, and her terminally ill mother. And she learns when she gets there that essentially her mother has decided that actually she's kind of had enough of her situation and she's preparing to end her own life in 4 days' time. So like on Tuesday. So it basically follows Erin having this sort of dual reaction of absolutely spiraling, because this whole decision was made without her. She finds herself, she's had enough, she's got enough to deal with, and now she has to contend with like losing her mother, while at the same time having to take on quite a big amount of responsibility because her mother wants her involved, to sort kind of funeral plans, to sort kind of, last days plans, to actually source some of the kind of resources that they need to kind of effectively end her life. And it is such a beautiful book. It is snarky. There's moments of like black comedy that are almost farcical. It's all about these like incredibly prickly women who like they love each other, but they don't really get on that well. They're a strong team, but also they get on each other's nerves. But it's about them realizing that actually this is the last time they have together. This is it. This is all of it. And how they kind of all come to terms with that, and how Erin has to learn to kind of let go of this woman who, for better or for worse, was her entire world while she was growing up. And it's just beautiful. I absolutely love it. I cannot wait for it to be out. I can't wait for people to read it. Yeah. What about you, Kieran? Just
to quickly say off that, I mean, you sold this book to me. I remember you said you were reading it on your... not your Kindle, what's it called?
Yeah, my little Kindle, the Kindle.
Your little Kindle,
yeah. The Kindle I read PDFs on. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. I remember you saying you were reading it and it was really, really amazing. And we met for coffee and you were telling me about it. And I was like, okay, you don't have to tell me anymore. I'm sold. It just I love those kind of moments of comedy and farcical nature that are kind of born from those moments of darkness. I love that because I think it's such a humane thing that you awkwardly fumble or say something that's funny, but you shouldn't be finding it funny. I love those kind of awkward situations.
It's exactly that. It is this like, oh no, I shouldn't. That's not funny, but then it actually kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So I'm very much looking forward to reading that. And when is it out, Isabel?
It is out in May.
Lovely. My choice for Picador is because I work across Picador and Bluebird. So I'm picking a Picador book. And I'm picking Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer, which Isabel can see here on the screen. Sorry, listeners, you can't.
Beautiful.
And this is another debut novel by Maddie, and it is about a family coming to terms with the death of the mother in the family. But what makes this such a different, unique, and breathtaking book is that the structure and the form is so unusual because at points the narrator is the cancer that's inside the mum.
Oh, wow.
Which I think might be a bit much for some people because there's a quote that says like, I might dance into her trachea, I might do this, I might do that. And it has this almost playful darkness that reminds one of like Max Porter. Like that's the best combo I can think of.
Yeah, like this sort of horrible dark little creature, like insidious little thing.
Exactly. Yeah. But it kind of flips between this and then the family trying to deal with the death of this mother.
So sorry, is this fiction or is it kind of non-fiction? Is it a blend?
It's fiction, but it's based on Maddie losing a parent a few years ago. So there's a lot of an autobiographical nature to this. But it's playful and funny at the same time. It's heartbreaking, but it's really bold as well. And I think it's so wonderful at the same time on dealing with a plethora of so many different issues of like motherhood, autonomy, language, and that kind of darkness within everyone that we're all capable of. It's so unique and different and wonderful. And when I read it, there's like a theatrical element to it as well. Like, again, when I read Max Porter, that kind of lyrical nature of his characters, you can definitely see it being adapted for the stage. It's truly wonderful. It really is. Unlike anything I've read for a while. And it's out at the end of March. And I just basically would like you all to read it.
How strange that completely unprompted we kind of chose books with very overlapping themes. That's synergy.
Well, doesn't that just prove that we've got very similar and excellent taste in books?
Yes, the wavelengths. So yes, I think that probably wraps up this probably quite long episode, an introduction into Back to the Books 2022.
Woo! We're back, baby.
Yay! Hopefully for the long term, we'll see. Sometimes we're busy.
I'll see you in 6 months. Bye.
Yeah, bye.